Welcome to a fresh new edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. No off season here as we have lots going on, and thank you for listening, supporting, and hopefully spreading the word about Spits and Suds, especially right now. Lots of you are wondering about trades, about coaching candidates and free agency. Just a few weeks, right around the corner, July 1st, hard to believe. And yesterday's podcast about a potential Jason Robertson trade with David Castillo received lots of comments and feedback, so we certainly appreciate that. And then on Tuesday, we began our Stars coaching candidate deep dives, talking about University of Denver head coach David Karl. We continue today with a couple of other candidates that have close ties to the Stars organization. And to talk about that, it's our good friend Stephen Meserve from 100 Degree Hockey, who does an amazing job covering the Texas Stars, has great knowledge of both candidates, the candidates we're talking about. Neil Graham of the Texas Stars, just coming off the Western Conference Finals loss to Abbotsford, and Karl Taylor, the winningest coach in Milwaukee Admirals history. He also was an assistant with the Texas Stars, and he does have NHL bench boss experience as an assistant and coached a couple of games. Most importantly, Father's Day is this weekend, so therefore We Win Here should be on your Father's Day gift list. If you're a dad listening, tell your kiddo, get me We Win Here. It's a must-read with Stephen Meserve and Sean Shapiro, two of our favorites. How are you, Stephen?
We're doing great out here. Off season came a little bit earlier than we all thought, both in Dallas and now, of course, in Cedar Park as well. Neil Graham's season is over with a Game 6 loss in Abbotsford, but heck, what a run for that team. And it's been a great chance to have an opportunity to cover this team for another deep run. And they, as you said, We Win Here is the name of the book for a reason. They do a lot of winning here in Cedar Park.
Yeah, no, they certainly do. Well, before we get to Graham, actually, I probably should have mentioned, like, from watching that series, Stephen, anything you picked up about a Manny Mahalra coach team?
I mean, I don't want to take anything away from Manny Malhotra. He was actually, if you believe it, our number one on our ballot for the AHL Coach of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
He did an amazing job, and we actually put him in over the equivalent of the President's Trophy and the AHL winner, the Laval Rocket head coach. And I thought he did an excellent job. But the thing that I think I want to talk about there is you look at the experience that they had, an NHL experience. They had almost 1,000 games of NHL experience
Wow.
on that team. I think it was like 989 or something along those lines. Texas had less than 200, and 99 of those came from Curtis McKenzie. So, that team
Big
was really
difference.
doing a lot with, yeah, big difference. And honestly, as soon as they beat Milwaukee, coached by Karl Taylor, as you mentioned, I really felt like the team was playing with house money. Like that has been their mountain to get over the past couple years, and they finally did it. And I feel like the organization is pretty happy with where they were able to be and being Central Division champions.
I watched Neil's exit interview, I guess, yesterday online, and you can go to the Texas Stars. They have the full interview. I don't know if this is it's a very small indicator, but I love what he was saying about his players, love what he was saying about the year. You could tell he wasn't satisfied, but at the same time, I just thought he handled himself really well. But you're around him on a daily basis covering this Texas Stars team. What are some nuggets that we need to know about Neil Graham as a coach and how he relates to the players and the success he's had in Texas, because he's been there now for 5.5 years?
Yeah, you look at Neil's background and the number comes up. This is his 13th year in the organization. He started as a player coach back with the Idaho Steelheads, and he ended up being probably more of a coach than a player that particular year, but at least on paper it was player coach with Brad Ralph, who's now won quite a few championships in Florida with the ECHL team down there. And then yeah, he came up as part of the change when Karl Taylor went and got the job in Milwaukee. He became the assistant to Derek Laxdal. But then when Jim Montgomery left the organization, Laxdal was called up, and all of a sudden Neil, after I don't know, maybe a few dozen games of assistant AHL experience, became the head. and has been ever since. His teams have never missed the playoffs. I know on HockeyDB it says he's missed the playoffs once. That year there actually were no playoffs because of COVID. So that's a mistake. If you see that one, that's an error on HockeyDB's website. His teams have never missed the playoffs. And the thing about Neil that I really appreciate, he's just he's very, all coaches are very detail oriented and those sorts of things. I think one of the things that's nice about Neil too, he's in the younger bunch. He's 40 years old, I believe, just turned this year. He relates really well to the players. He's done a great job developing talent. He has a deep connection to a lot of the players who are currently on the Dallas Stars, and that's a huge, check mark in his favor towards him being the next head coach or somewhere on the staff of the Dallas Stars. He's also just been, I think, a good soldier for the organization. AHL head coach, talking to Derek Laxdal many years ago, he felt like it was the hardest job in hockey because you get call-ups to your main club. You can have your best player get called up and you never see him again, right? Texas has had that happen more than a few times. And then who do you get to replace them with? Well, you have to find somebody from the ECHL and sign a PTO or call somebody up from Idaho. And obviously the replacement value there is not the same. And so it's a difficult job night in and night out to do. And he's had a pretty stellar winning record with the Texas Stars over the seasons he's been here.
Might be the exception to the rule, but I think Sean does bring up a good point as far as it's good to have experience behind an NHL bench. And Sean and Robert Tiffin on Sean's Shap Shots Substack, which you can subscribe to, did a real nice coaching breakdown of some candidates. But, Sean talked about bench experience in the NHL. However, and it could be a rarity, but I look at one of the coaches in the Stanley Cup final, and he was coaching in the AHL and before that junior hockey, and that's where he coached Connor McDavid, and I'm talking about Chris Knobloch. And he has turned out to be an amazing head coach for Edmonton. What are your thoughts as far as the transition from AHL to NHL, and do you need to have bench boss experience in the NHL to get to that next level?
I think it's an interesting thing because Neil has a little bit of an advantage in that he is in an organization where he has already been in the organization for years. He knows all the key players. They all know him. Players both on the ice, actual players, and others like Scott White. Scott White has been his GM the entire time he's been with Texas or Idaho. He's known Scott White and had that relationship. He's known Jim Nill for most of that time as well, right? He gets a little bit of a leg up in terms of that. If you're going to hire Neil to be the NHL head coach, I think what you do is you bring in somebody who has had a lot of assistant experience. I know the name has been mentioned of, for example, what Rick Bowness was for Jim Montgomery,
Yep.
right? That is a great comparison. And that's what I think you would want to do to supplement the fact that he has not been an NHL head coach before. But I think he gets a little bit of a cheat code there in that he gets the entire organization, knows him. Nobody's going to be like, who's this Neil Graham guy? Like, they all know him and he knows them. And there's a trust factor that's been built over the years. You think back, and I've mentioned the story before, I continue to go back to it because it's just so evident in especially this playoffs how important it was. Thomas Harley coming out of the OHL was an offensive guy who had no defense, whatsoever to his game. And that's an exaggeration, but we'll just say that, leave that at what it is. They threw him down to the AHL and they said, you need to break this thing down and put it back together. And the guy who did that is Neil Graham. And by the way, while he was doing that, Jake Ottinger was in net and Jason Robertson. And think about all of the guys who've come through. It's most of those guys have come through Texas in one way or another. And Neil Graham was there. And so there's an instant connection with the guys in the room. And that can help to build that, the trust factor for the entire organization.
You also have to give him a lot of credit because he now has, and he talked about this yesterday in his exit interview, for the second straight year, this time Justin Ritzovian, AHL Rookie of the Year. So kids that come up, he seems to be able to coach them into situations, winning situations, and just quite the award for Justin Ritzovian.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you and I are both big fans of Justin
Hmm.
Ritzovian, and credit to the player, of course, for doing that. But the player, gets put in situations about the coach. The coach continues to, give them opportunities to shine and give them coaching and guidance, and also recognizing the player that you have and recognizing the offensive potential that he has. We all thought he'd be a great defensive forward, but then he scored the most points of any rookie in the AHL this year. Where did that come from? Well, I mean, part of it is, Neil recognizing that and the team recognizing that, using him effectively on the power play. All of those pieces of the puzzle have to come together. And I think, you know, the fact that the talent development has been such a steady pipeline really speaks to what he's been able to do. That's what you want an AHL team to do. But that's not the place that the Dallas Stars are at. They're not developing talent in the NHL at this point. They're not in that point in their career. And the question is, how do you take the place that Dallas is at, and is Neil the coach to push them over the edge from just getting into the conference finals to making it to the Stanley Cup and winning the Stanley Cup? And that's, I think, where the question becomes, well, okay, I mean, the line is going to be, well, he hasn't won anything yet. Um, and it's a fair criticism, right? Especially when you compare against like a David Carl, who you talked to about the other day. Um, so I think that's one of the knocks that you might put on him, if you're gonna make a negative case, for not hiring Neil.
The organizations are so close. I imagine that stylistically they try to play the same game as well. A lot of people up here, and I mentioned this in the David Carl interview the other day regarding physicality. A lot of people want the Stars to be tougher. They feel as though they wear down in the Western Conference Finals. And, Edmonton kind of pushed them around at times, and now we're seeing Florida push Edmonton around. So physicality is certainly a top topic around here. How does that fit the Neil Graham system?
He's going to demur like any coach would on, oh, did you give a response, or, how did you guys react? But I mean, the proof is in the pudding on the way that any team plays. And if you want, I believe it was game 5, here in Cedar Park. There was as Sean would put it, kerfuffle. Somebody took a run at somebody, and who ended up in the box? It was Curtis McKenzie, their captain, and Alex Petrovic, who wears an A. And they both took 5-minute fighting majors for standing up for their guys. So, not going to say that that's, indicative of the entire year, but like they're not afraid to, they're in the Western Conference Final too. And they stood up for their guys. They ended up winning that game, by the way, and Curtis scored the game-winning goal. So, they're not afraid to step into that, and at the AHL you get a little bit more of that even. So his kind of physicality, he never shies away from it. His teams don't shy away from it as much as he might, not give us the straight answer in the post game scrum.
All right, let's move on to another former assistant, Karl Taylor, with the Milwaukee Admirals, winningest coach in Admirals history, multi playoff appearances, had that historic, what was it, Stephen? Was it 19-game winning streak at one point in
Yeah, exactly.
Milwaukee? Yeah.
19 games.
Yeah.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. What about his coaching style? And you were around Karl Taylor for a bit. What kind of guy are we talking about in Karl Taylor?
The vibe that I get from Karl Taylor is he so Texas Stars have known Milwaukee forever. They've always been in the same division since Texas entered the AHL. And it's always been sort of a genial rivalry. They always kind of, yeah, of course, one knocks one out in the playoffs, or, they see each other 8 times a year or whatever. But it's been, good mutual respect. I got to tell you, when Karl Taylor joined that team, they rallied around him and the way that he runs his bench, and the whole team just got, I don't know if meaner is the right word, but just like they were focused with a purpose. And now the Texas Stars Milwaukee rivalry it's mean, and they hate each other. And I mean, I don't think anything gave them more joy than knocking out Milwaukee this year for the Texas side of things. Karl just has a way, I've talked to folks about it, of just like getting his players to rally around him and around their common cause. And you look at what they've been able to do. They have gone deep into the playoffs each of the past 2 years. Before this year, they lost to Texas this year, but before that, they went to the Western Conference Finals twice, and just weren't able to get over the hump with Coachella Valley Firebirds. Honestly, I think Karl brings like a energy and tenacity to his teams that is exciting, but at the same time, he's not had, same as Neil, any NHL experience, as a full-time
Yeah.
situation. He did obviously, as you mentioned, come in and help out a little bit when there were some gaps. But he has been in the AHL or ECHL for pretty much most of his career.
It's I feel like, I don't know, maybe you can't go wrong with any of them, whether it's Mahalra or Graham. I mean, these are quality candidates. I guess my question is there were 8 coaching vacancies. Didn't see much talk about these guys elsewhere.
I think the stock, one of those interesting things, and you look back at Willie Desjardins, who won the Calder Cup with Texas in 2014, and then left immediately. And he basically had his pick of the litter. He could choose Vancouver or Pittsburgh, and he ended up choosing Vancouver to go to for his head coaching gig. Now, of course, a little bit different. He had NHL experience with Dallas and all these sorts of things. But when you get to those final couple of stages, there's a lot of eyes on you. And so I think Manny Mahalra will get more. There'll be some smoke there because of what he's gotten his Canucks team to, the Abbotsford Canucks to, in the final. And Charlotte looks like an absolute wagon right now, which is crazy because they're Florida's affiliate, and Florida looks similar in the final as well. But if they're able to go deep with Charlotte, or heck, even win it, you're going to hear Malhotra's name a lot more for NHL head coaching gigs. I think that's one of those things where like you gotta kind of get picked up a bit out of the obscurity of the AHL to get the name mentioned. But then again, we're probably only paying attention to a few of these teams. There's a lot of great coaches out there who may not get all the accolades in the pub necessarily. The AHL, unfortunately, is not as well covered of a league as the NHL. And so there could be guys out there that you just don't know about. I'll give you an example. The Iowa Wild head coach, Brett McLean, just got picked up to be an assistant coach with Vancouver. Iowa hasn't made the playoffs in a while, but if he's the right guy and he's got the things that you need, then he could jump to that next level. So, there could be other names out there that we're not thinking about, but my honest thought, and, Gavin, we were talking about this a little bit before we got on the air, is now's the time, it feels like, for a guy like Neil to make a jump. And if you've spent 13 years developing him as a coach, the last thing you want to do is see him go have success with another organization.
Great point.
So even if your head coach is not Neil Graham, I agree with the general sentiment, and I've been on this train for a while. Like, we're kind of at this point where he needs to be on the NHL bench. He's ready for that next step. That assistant role in Dallas would be great. You think about what you could bring in of, like, let's say you hired a head coach who is not from the Dallas system. You bring in Neil as an assistant, and he immediately has a connection with half the roster.
Yeah.
Right. Who you can build that connection right away. And I think about it in terms of my own career. Like, you want to develop in-house talent and keep them here and give them the opportunities to put them in the best position. And if you're going to, like I said, spend 13 years developing somebody, you want to be in a position to give them that next opportunity when it arises, and the moment might be here right now.
All right, final one for you, buddy. Curtis McKenzie coming back for another season with Texas?
I certainly hope so.
I do too.
I certainly hope so. He's built his family here and all those sorts of things, but the siren song of more dollars in Europe is always strong.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure that if Scott White called them up and said, "Hey, we want to have you for another year, put the C on your chest, and let you play one more here in Texas," pretty hard to say no to that. And I think given what he does for this team and where he lands, and all of their all-time lists and all those sorts of things, and it's not like he's really fallen off all that much in the end. He's still contributing. Like I said, scored the game-winning goal in Game 5 there to send him back to Abbotsford. He's a heart and soul guy on this team, and I certainly hope that he's back for another year if that's the way the cards fall.
Yeah, what a career he has certainly had. All right, Father's Day right around the corner. Stephen Meserve, 100 Degree Hockey, co-authored with Sean Shapiro, the book We Win Here. Terrific look at the Texas Stars organization, how it relates to Dallas, some great Dallas Stars stories, and the foreword is written by the guy that we just talked about and actually sat down at the kitchen table and wrote this foreword, Curtis McKenzie. You can find Steven at 100 Degree Hockey, 100degreehockey.com. He also posted the other day on Twitter/X a story that he wrote about Neil Graham as far as getting the next gig. So a lot of good stuff coming out of 100 Degree Hockey. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Gavin. And, lots of stuff will be coming over the summer. There's a lot of changes with the Texas Stars, as there always are in the AHL. So stick around and we'll give you all the intel that we can.
Absolutely. And that does it for another edition of Spits and Suds, another head coach potential deep dive. We'll have more programs for you soon. Until our next podcast, everyone, thank you so much for listening and supporting Spits and Suds. You guys are really helping us. You guys are great teammates. Have a great day, everyone.